very brief topics. Okay, so this is translation in the era of information technology. So I'm sharing the screen with you right away. This topic, as you know, it pertains to, so far we have been talking about that how different theories evolved in terms of translation studies and how it evolved from fourth century onwards. And let's see that now we are at this point that we are talking about the translation in the era of इंफॉर्मेशन टेक्नोलॉजी कि ये अब इतनी करंट times में is there any particular strategy for in terms of translation? So what is it? Okay, so this is what it means. I'm just coming to this. We start from here, the role of changing technologies. Okay, so we'll start from here, that what is actually changing technologies and what is it, or maybe I will read a little bit अगर पीछे का पढ़ देती हूँ आपको just for it. Is a kind of introduction to what it's all about. Okay, so this topic again is taken from your source text, वही जो आपकी है, Translation Studies by Jeremy Monday. So the future or cooperation of fragmentation. Translation studies, we're talking about that how translation studies moving on towards the in 20th century, 21st century to be exact. Okay. The translation studies, therefore, already functioning to borrow McCarthy's terms at the intersections of existing fields and is developing a new interdisciplinary character. The question is how far this is a strength or weakness for the field as a whole. Each of its subject areas is competing for prime position, which perhaps the most evident split being that between linguists and cultural theorists. So the former dominated in the 1950s and 1980s, while in the last decade, linguistic theories have been marginalized by scholars moving within or adopting the practice of other disciplines. Some translation scholars, among them Besnett and Lefebvre, have been scathingly dismissive of those working in linguistics, given the range of interests and frictions represented in translation studies. One must wonder whether there might at some point not be a total fragmentation of the discipline and either a separation of the different strands or a consolidation of the previous disciplinary separation, like modern languages, cultural studies, linguistics, and all that. So a key question for contemporary researchers faced with the proliferation of current work in translation studies, how far they should specialize, what may be needed in future is some greater degree of specialization and more collaboration on joint projects. And for the moment, however, the kinds of interdisciplinary approach described in this chapter seems to be one of bridging the gap. Okay, now let's move on to the actual topic. The role of changing technology, that we are going to see that how IT or what information technology or computers or WW World Wide Web will play any particular role in the field of translation studies. Let's see how far the role of WW will be there, World Wide Web, and in terms of computer translation, is there what would be the scope of that? So the role of changing technologies. The tools at the disposal of the translator and the theorist are altered. Okay, so what are these? Computer is a tool used currently. Okay, initially what the translators would be using handwritten translations or they are typed करते होंगे on their say on the typewriters, but we're moving over our word processors. But here we're talking about it that how computer as a tool is available to the translations to the translators of the current era. So the tools at the disposal of the translator and the theorists are altering, they're changing over time. One of the reasons for this is the growth in the new technologies, which inevitably determine how new areas of study or cause re-examination of established ones. So corpus linguistics, which actually I used this term corpus in the previous lecture as well. Corpus is actually a data. Corpus linguistics is actually, we talk it, it's the analysis of large amounts of electronically stored text. So in itself, corpus linguistics is something new, is used as a tool, used helpful as collecting data in terms of specifically so in the area of research in linguistics, that different large data are called of reserved or they're stored electronically. Different texts are stored there, and then this huge data corpus, there's a large amount of electronically stored text is available. So how it could be used for the sake of translation. So corpus linguistics already facilitates the study of features of translated language. And in itself, this corpus linguistics, as it's the collection of huge data electronically stored, it has opened up a new avenue of research as a tool in terms of that. In itself, there are softwares which help to facilitate, to kind of look at and analyze that what are the particular features of the translated language. We pair of language. Okay, just go back to this week's class. We talked about Tori's class, the descriptive translation studies, right? Where he talked about norms and he talked about pairs of source text and target text. उनके रख के, and this would be like, these would be available in the computer software as well. And then how you'll see that the present application of corpus linguistics are limited. The case study below suggests that it may have applications for, amongst others, descriptive translation studies. It would have applications for descriptive translation studies because the computer is able to analyze whole text in a way that was impossible manually. So this is like this computers has really facilitated in terms of that this large corpus data, linguistic data just stored in the form of text, computer can memory me, and then you can easily compare the source text with the target text, and then you can, with the help of the software, it can also analyze your work, and it also could also, with the help of like descriptive translation studies, norms सामने रख ले, with that application, you would be able to analyze the whole text in a way which is not possible earlier manually. Okay, so more access to data Paul starts with this. Excuse. If you could just read, just excuse me for a moment.
It's okay, ma'am. Take your time.
Okay,
Ma'am, take your time, ma'am.
okay. Okay, can you hear me? Class, can
Yes,
you?
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am,
Um,
everything fine, ma'am?
हाँ वो एक्चुअली my throat became so dry और पानी से बात नहीं बन रही थी मैंने थोड़ा सा मीठा चीनी खाई है from that but I won't be that loud now okay आपके
Okay,
सामने
ma'am.
टेक्स्ट आ रहा है आप उसको देखें ठीक है
Okay,
okay
ma'am.
we begin from where we left okay so we're
Okay.
talking about this electronic data right okay so more more access to data of all sorts will be speeded up and news links posts and for example online bookshops have also been search facilities that enable the user to seek information on readership profiles and on genres such as translation or translated fiction and the results of such searches can give important insight to the reception of works and all that. Okay, so that means everything is related. You can see online books, bookshops होगी, translated fiction, the different type of genres हो सकते हैं, and you can easily, access to, as a translator, if somebody's involved in this as a profession, at just at the fingertips, you can have search, you can get so much of data, translated work आपके सामने आ सकता है. And you can also get insight into the reception of works which have been done, and that means at least such a quick manner you have access to so much of data which was not possible before the age or before the era of I. That you will agree. Okay, like all आप research करेंगे next semester में for your research article उसमें भी practically आपको experience होगा कि how computers are so helpful. Okay, right. Okay, let's move on. So clearly there is a concern that those with limited access to new technology will be disadvantaged, but experience shows that contact, at least within the research community, is greatly facilitated, and the availability and exchange of information, for example, through conference postings, calls for papers, websites of translation centers, and individual researchers relying on details of their current projects and papers, and all facilitate the communication among scholars. So everything is kind of facilitated with the, in terms of even if getting to know about your own conference being held on your domain of your interest or websites or translation centers. This is all like sharing of the information, which was not earlier on possible. So, and also individual researches people who have been conducted in this field, that will also be available, and current projects which are being conducted. So everything would kind of facilitate communication among scholars of translation studies. Okay. So finally, internet is also changing the status. You're all aware, internet. अब इसमें तो generally speaking तो you're well aware of what the use of computers is, but this is in specifically इसको आप application देख लें कि इस discipline में क्या है translation. So internet is also changing the status, visibility of translators, translation. Not only can professional translators now easily work transnationally, that means even it helps in speeding the process. How? If somebody working in India or Pakistan wants to send work, say, get it published in UK or USA, it will be so easy just sending this, emailing everything. And who else would be knowing better? जैसे आप आजकल आपकी क्लासेस ऑनलाइन हो रही हैं, आप असाइनमेंट्स मेल कर रहे हो, everybody seated, obviously entails that more hard work on in terms of कि अब हमारे कोई टाइम फिक्स नहीं है, normal working hours होते हैं वो नहीं है, now everything, even at night you can get emails from the office, from everywhere, but at the same time you can also get satisfied with everything what you're doing is from your own, from the comfort of your own home. Okay. So we're talking about in particular its benefits for translation studies. So professional translators can easily work transnationally, means from one nation to another, one country to another via email, but the need for translation itself is also increasing. Then you have got very search engines which were offering kind of a lot of data, automatic machine and translation of individual, and that is also done, translation of individual pages and whole websites in many major world languages are available in translation, and it's often with English as a source language, because English has its status as the lingua franca. अब तक इसकी वही status है as a world language. So it's all English is either as the source language or the target language, whatever it is. Perhaps the best known automatic translation package is Sistrans, Babelfish, and then you also have the search engine Alta Vista, and then the website is already given, and then it can translate between at least 13 language pairs and claims. You see, so if everything is will be so fast that it can translate between at least 13 different language pairs जो हैं उनको translate कर सकते हैं, and claims that over 1 million translations are generated in this when each day. Look at the speed, you see, 1 million translations. How that wasn't possible, humanly possible. That's right. If humans would be doing that, to this speed, the machine की हो सकती है कि over 1 million translations could be generated a single day. So translation is thus available at the touch of a button for internet users worldwide. So they could just get it just going to the right website, and then just at the touch of a button, you can use it and you can get things translated. However, it is a translation that conceals the human involvement and gives the impression of it being an easy and automatic process. But then mostly people think that this type of process would entail that it would be concealing the human involvement in it, and it also almost gives the impression that that it's of being an easy and kind of an automatic process the way it is being done. The the developments outlined in the section might lead to further consolidation of English as the major global language. To move on and we say what is the development, what is I should say the advantage of in the this computer sorry in this field would be that the further consolidation of English as the major, and obviously when we're talking about this whole thing, the language is English always has always an upper edge advantage if you are well versed in English, and if this is the translation from source language or target language with an English एक language है, you will always have an advantage because English is a major global language of communication. But it means increased use of translation commercially, and even in terms of used commercially in the field of translation as well. So furthermore, in, while information technology is bound to become more influential as a tool and subject of translation studies. So further on, we say that information technology is bound to become more influential as a tool and subject of translation studies research in future. And the current wealth of ideas is being generated within the field will no doubt involve the re-evaluation and revision. So you'll see that when you talk about with the help of this, the usage of involvement of information technology or computers, you'll see that it is almost using it as a tool, and the subject of translation studies has thoroughly undergone a change. It's like the whole current wealth of ideas will be generated within this field, which will no doubt also involve a kind of re-evaluation and reinvigoration of older models. Okay, so the following case study follows the line of interdisciplinary research described in this chapter. It brings together linguistic, literary, cultural analysis supported by tools from Colvin. Okay. So we're going to look at it one sample the way your book gives it, that it gives one or two case studies होते हैं just किसी भी model पे base करके. So I thought in the previous topics I have already been discussing with you the case studies, but with this particular with this model, the model of using IT in translation studies, I wanted you to have a look at a case study thoroughly, the way it is given in the book, to see that how effective corpus linguistic is and how effective computers can be in the field of translation. So let's move on and see what is this case study about. Okay. So case study. This case study means कि एक real life का एक text लेते हैं और उसको देखते हैं कैसे ये theory या ये कैसे apply किया जाएगी. In this case, we are just going to look at one Spanish text short story written by, maybe you're already aware of, Gabriel Garcia Marquez. इसका आपने नाम सुना होगा, very well Colombian writer who writes in Spanish, has been awarded for his effort. So we are going to look at his short story. So this case study demonstrates one interdisciplinary methodology for describing a translation. It concerns a short story by the Colombian writer, Colombian Gabriel Garcia Marquez, and it is actually translated. This work written in Spanish is translated in English, And let's see who the translator is, by Edith Rossman or something like that. So there are several practical and logistical obstacles. So he says that if this case study involves, in terms of translating this short story by Garcia, it entails that it's आपने पूरी story को translate किया है, it will involve practical, logistical obstacles to the analysis of a complete, very lengthy translation. So for this reason, even scholars such as Van Leeuwenhoek would put together a model for systematic evaluation of shifts and have tended to concentrate on abstract one method of overcoming some of the difficulties by using the computer-assisted analytical tool of corpus linguistic को आप use करें, computer-assisted analytical tool for the analysis of the text. If the texts are held in electronic form, concordance of any word or word strings plus their corresponding translation can be. So it explains that if the text is already in the electronic form, and if you're looking for any concordance, similarity of word or word string, and you will be able to access. It's not in minutes or hours. It is in within seconds. So these tools just immediately speed up access data, all instance given called in a few seconds, and free the researcher to concentrate on close analysis. So you will be very conveniently given the required word string to keep translating version, and you can just move on to the activity close analysis of the phenomenon. So this is, in a way, we talk is the interdisciplinary methodology. For this study functions as, and let's have this critical points of this particular model. The case study here. A linguistic comparison of text is carried out. This can involve close comparison of source text and target. Source text वही तो Colombian writer का जो उसने Spanish language में target text. To begin to see the translation strategies which are employed and the consideration of literary and narrative devices, and for present study, the linguistic construction of narratorial point of view is especially important, and the models followed are those of Simpson and Fowler. Then the analysis, point number 2 is the analysis computer assisted. Initial findings from the reading of the text and followed up through the whole story by concordance. So initially, if you by the computer system, you find out the reading of the text, whole story by concordance, and comparative word frequency list can be scrutinized, and then you'll give information what kinds of lexical choices are there, and sentence structure can possibly analyze, including sentence length. And so, technically speaking, linguistically, we are it will facilitate a lot in terms of when you're analyzing language from this perspective. The result then can be set in the socio-cultural framework, as we given earlier in chapter 8 and 9. The socio-cultural framework can draw on relevant concepts of perception theory, the cultural studies, and they include the ideological economic pressures from both sources. So this could be further on आप इसको किसी theory socio-cultural framework से भी इसको analyze कर सकते हैं on relevant concepts, reception theory, culture study, and this will also include the ideological and economic pressures at play, both from the forces of translation, criticism, and participants. Okay? So in case of Garcia's Marquez story, close reading reveals. So if you look at Garcia's Marquez story, you will see that close reading reveals that there are no major additions. इसमें कोई एडिशन ओमिशन नहीं की गई विद इन द टारगेट टेक्स्ट को, जो एक्चुअल स्टोरी से ना कुछ चीजें ओमिट की गई हैं ना कुछ ऐड की गई हैं, एंड द पैराग्राफ्स एंड सेंटेंस तक ऑलमोस्ट इट्स मेंटेन्ड. I must say that was a very appropriate translation in a given paragraph, and sentence structure is almost retained. So there's a certain trend towards exploitation, especially of cohesive links, grammatical formalization within the dialogue. So even within the dialogue, these things are catered to. Okay? So increased cohesion is also suggested from the comparison of word list, number of possessive, and you look at technically speaking, linguistically, even ये चीजें भी देखी गई, number of possessive pronouns in the target text, close analysis, several instances where this is not due to systematic difference between languages. So what I personally see that this is a case study, why it's called interdisciplinary, कि है तो ये literary text, पर उसका analysis इतना thorough तरीके से किया जा रहा है, it's almost like done it from a linguistic perspective. That's why it's called interdisciplinary. आप उसको text को analyze भी कर रहे हैं, and with the help of this tool. Okay, so concordance can be can be produced by all sentence initial items in the two texts, and this helps in the analysis of narrative point of view, especially the order in which elements are presented to the reader. The beginning of the first sentence example, even the beginning of the first sentence or the first example, then it has to be looked up. So it is so thorough, and I should say, in terms of appropriate, कि इतनी clarity और इतनी closeness है between the source text and the target text. Okay, and then even the, keeping in mind the narrative point of view and the order of elements which are presented to the reader. So I'm not going to read the Spanish part. इसके नीचे भी इसका translation English में किया in the afternoon arrival at home. So we're just going to skip that. You can read on your own. So next is in the target text, the TT, that is target text. The specific time element in the afternoon has been right shifted and the action of returning slightly emphasized, changing a little the narrative point of view. In general analysis of concordance, you read that the source text evolves as further more time and place adjuncts in first person. So you see that even such an, should I say, detailed analysis of concordance found between the source text involves rather more time and place adjuncts in the first position than does the third. And similarly, the syntax is also sometimes more complex in the English, and the source text sentences continue. It is with black and fluorescent and resemble gypsy, and it's translated. These are just examples given from the text. And it was, all the examples, I'm going to skip them. You can read on your own. That it was black and fluorescent and resembled the gypsy skirts and translated as black and all that. So it says such shifts have an effect, simple causal link, and consist on the workings of the child's narrative mind, whereas the target text breaks the sentence and begins again with a complex adjectival structure in black and fluorescent. So, although the translator often follows quite closely the lexical syntactic patterns of the source text, the word order and the cohesion shifts noted above seem to be target language oriented. Increased cohesion from all is widely felt to be a universal feature of translation. So, however, consideration of the wider cultural background adds an extra dimension. It adds actually an extra dimension to the analysis. Garcia's Marquez has been extremely successful in commercially novel. So we are going to technically look at that if Garcia's Marquez work has been successfully, he himself was, a well-known figure and a native of Colombia. And throughout the Spanish-speaking countries, he's well-known, very well-known. His works are worldwide. For that meant his being a Spanish-speaking, not only Spanish-speaking countries, all over the world wide, his works are well read. So almost immediate publication in English. So he says that if what to talk about that immediate publication in English was guaranteed for any such a well-known person that any work of his was kind of it was contracted or it was guaranteed by as a work of fiction anywhere even getting it translated in translation in English which for others could be kind of notoriously difficult market for foreign authors, but not the case with his work, in particular his work 100 Years of Solitude. So almost immediate publication in English is guaranteed for any of new Garcia's works of fiction. It's contracted, and it's contracted in New York-based translators by Edith Crossman, who's always translated Garcia's work since 1980s. एक fixed उनको translator मिल गया who's been translating Garcia's work since mid 1980s, and the same translation is also used in UK with obviously the different cover. So the enormous success of Grossman's translations and those of Gregory de Balsa receding in a work that may partially be due to some of the domestic market. So he says that we found out the way Garcia's translation is a success story, the way it has been carried on, and it's acceptable in the English market, not only USA but in UK as well. And then rendering of children's speech into structures that probably more closely resemble her own and the leadership of Edith Crossman herself. It views the goal of a translation. So in the following terms, the writer's Garcia Marquez would be done had he had been writing in English. So with an echo of Dryden's observations on translating Latin poetry in 17th century England, like he saw that make Virgil speak such English as he would have spoken. Remember when we're doing Dryden's work, I quoted this, that make Virgil speak such English as he would himself have spoken if he had been born in England. And this this strategy would also be due to its publishers' a general concern for a fluent text to avoid alienating the audience. And if you look at the study of the reviews of the books that were published, and it's an indication that a modified image of Garcia's Marquez has been offered to American audience. And remember that we talked about this concept of the British concept of domestication and foreignization. So these things are at work because and sometimes his Colombian background is downplayed both on the cover of the book and in the comments in the review as well. And his status as a leading उसको ज़्यादा highlight किया जा रहा है, his status as a leading international literary figure, and more that his Colombian roots to him उसको ज़रा downplay किया जा रहा है. So his status as a leading international literary figure is emphasized in the glowing reviews. There are few comments on translation and observations concerning the style, always refer to the English. It goes without saying that shifts similar to those noted in contents above. So you see that the shifts do take place in terms of the way a translation is carried on and the way it's presented to the target text audience. So somebody wants to join. So there may be several issues here at work. So we can say that there would be several issues at work. Okay. So there may be several issues here at work, and the success of Garcia's Marquez is in many ways appropriated for the foreign audience. So it is appropriated for foreign audience that it is interested. कि जितनी उसकी गार्सिया की translation है from Spanish, it is more or less appropriated in terms of, by appropriate means in terms of modified for the foreign audience because it's interesting because the way his works have been bold on the foreign English speaking audience, that it has to be modified for the foreign audience, and it's interesting that something similar occurs in reviews. It occurs in reviews even in Spanish as well. So the discourse of Colombian Spanish is being translated into dominant and transparent form of political and economic. और उसकी discourse जो उसने actually एक किताब लिखी है, all his book is written in Spanish, is translated with this perspective that it is receptive in the dominant and transparent form of political economic power the USA. Okay, तो उसको ऐसे इसको appropriate किया गया, modify किया गया that it is to be acceptable in the dominant and transparent forms of in the economic power of USA, and also elements of Garcia's background that do not fit easily with this name. And you see, the translator also keep in mind that if they look back at the elements of Garcia's own background in terms of his initial background from, in his own country, Colombia, that do not they feel, the translator feel that does not easily fit in with the new image, the success story, this success story, huge fan following in terms of the, readers, Garcia's novel. So which anything pertaining to his own background, which do not fit on easily with the new image, has been kind of appropriated by the translator, such as his non-fiction and socialist writings, and even his initial writings, whatever he wrote as non-fiction or socialist writings, and that means the way he thought at that time, thought process also you see changes. So all these socialist writings, which tend to be translated, if they tend to be given far less prominence, than these, they often suffer omission. So the latter has been happened. So has happened, for example, to the translation of his more recent article, and as a Cuban boy shipwrecked off the coast of Florida. In British English translations, both text and more particularly the photographs that accompany relate payments of the dominant. Okay, so this was in terms of right. This was in fact we have come to the end of today's work. This was in terms of I had included this case study for you to have a look at that how a case study carried on actual text, the way it is translated, just for you to have a look at that what strategies at work, how it is conducted, and what is it. So and then it is followed by also that there's sometimes a critique covered on by some other perspective. So let me read this discussion of case study as well. The brief description of an interdisciplinary case study attempts to bring together forms of corpus linguistics, cultural analysis, and the results show some potential. So they relate shifts at the linguistic level to efforts on the narrative points of view and on the texture of the text. So most importantly are that our harvest study in section given earlier in 11.3, and that they have to consider the social cultural environment around the translation process and the ideological and discourse motivation that may be encouraging the linguistic shift. So nevertheless, it's clear that this approach is not without its dangers. So at present, computer-assisted analysis is limited in its capacity. It would be wrong to think that corpus linguistics can interpret findings or even provide an analyst with all the data they might wish. So we say we have to keep in mind that the limitations of computer-assisted analysis are there at presently. And if you think that the corpus linguistics can interpret each and everything and provide analysts with all data they wish for, it would be kind of interesting, but although not necessarily easy, for example, to be able to research semantic fields or to compare translation choices with those in range of other similar translated fiction. So close critical analysis still required in order to interpret the findings. So whatever you may say, still a close critical analysis is required if you have to interpret the findings and the choice of linguistic model conditions that are used. So finally, the mapping of linguistic phenomena onto ideological and discursive constraints also reflects the ideology of the researcher. There may still be a tendency to seek out specific elements to claim that they are caused by ideological conditions. So not all would agree, for example, that the assessment above this image of Garcia has been given as, we say that the way Garcia is presented in the American audience is like inappropriated into the US culture and not that translation study is centric. So you see that if you look at this, you and I as critics can see that maybe with the help of translation, with the way assisted by this corpus linguistic and the different parameters, different theories used by that, different norms. You see that you can say that somehow whatever the image of Garcia has been kind of appropriated, that means modified according to the US culture, and not that translation strategy is necessarily the cause of it. Okay. So that's all. We have come to the end of this topic, and this was basically related to translation in the era of information technology. Okay, this is, it is no doubt something new. I should say a new development in translation studies. I remember just 2 years back, I went to read a paper in an international conference in Patna, Dinaswaman University, and that was basically a conference on linguistics. And there was some very good presenters, and there was this presenter, a lady who had come from USA, and she basically introduced उनका paper ही इस पे था कि translation by machine and translation done manually. तो she her paper उनका theme जो था जो research जो उन्होंने paper present किया, it was a kind of based on a comparison of translations done with the help of machine, that is computer, okay, and translation done through manually, okay, and it would be compared how it would be done and the rest of it. So you see, no doubt it has its wide application and its importance as well in terms of the present era में आप कह सकते हैं, in terms of if you look at the way things are moving is that you cannot everything in fact is we are all dependent upon computers, isn't it? So इसका अगर इसी issue के आप देख लें कि if it's applicable in particular in this field as well, it will be very useful, it will be much faster, आप ये काम जल्दी कर सकते हैं. And then you have also to see that with the help of, obviously with the help of computer, things will be more organized. आप उसकी documentation भी easy होगी, it will be kept up, it will be more faster, and you could be able to share with people, with everywhere, wherever it is. So computer, usage of computer or application of computer in terms of the way it has been done in present era would always stand, it would be, there will always be advantages in particular that. Okay? So, yeah, as I said, with this we have come to the end of today's topic. And if you have any questions, you can ask me. The next topic will be the last topic, lecture number 18. I'll probably just upload it today. That is related, in fact, very briefly, I've tried to introduce you to this topic, which will be the last topic, that is related with the translation and literature. And I have, kind of focused just on some very important strategies in terms of that. What are the strategies for translating poetry, and what are the translation strategies for translating? Like new translators, people who like you, new in this field, if you're interested to see that what are the actually strategies given by renowned theorist in terms of कि क्या steps उन्होंने बताए हैं कि अगर आप पोइट्री को ट्रांसलेट करते हैं तो क्या steps फॉलो करने हैं, और अगर आप प्रोज को ट्रांसलेट करते हैं तो some steps. So that will be an important topic, not very lengthy. Inshallah, we'll be able to do it. Now,